The gymnasium smelled faintly of fresh wood and cheap perfume, the kind that clung to the air like memories you couldn't shake. I could feel my palms sweating against the folds of my dress, my nerves fraying just under the surface. Tonight should have been about celebrating Kaia, her moment to shine, but somehow everything felt more like a performance. I looked around, trying to steady my breathing. Parents milling about, adjusting their ties, checking their phones. Kids in caps and gowns, their eyes bright with excitement, their shoulders heavy with expectations. In the front row, I saw the principal giving his usual speech with the practiced enthusiasm of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. But I wasn't listening to him. Couldn't. My gaze kept drifting to the familiar faces sitting across from me. Brent and Madison. He looked exactly how I remembered, slightly too neat, his hair combed to perfection, his shirt pressed as if he had somewhere important to be. Madison sat next to him, a sharp smile plastered on her face, her eyes scanning the crowd like she was calculating her next move. The woman had always known how to keep herself in the center of attention. Not that I blamed her. She'd been playing that game long before I'd ever caught on. And yet, despite it all, it was the seat beside them that made my chest tighten. Kaia had always been the one to sit at the very edge of the crowd, separate but never quite fitting in. It wasn't because she wanted to. It was because the space she occupied was too big to be confined to just one spot. She was different. I had always known that. In some ways, it felt like the world had never quite known what to do with her. "Are you all right?" My mother's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to look at her, a concerned frown playing on her lips. Grandma Ruth was beside her, her hand resting on my knee in a way that was meant to comfort, but instead only reminded me of how far I felt from the people I once relied on. I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just thinking." My voice wavered, and I hated it. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about the years that led up to this night, the years Kaia had spent trying to be enough for everyone else. Her father, her teachers, the world. And for what? So she could stand here now, in front of all of us, and still feel like she wasn't enough. Even after everything she'd done, everything she'd overcome, I still wasn't sure how she felt about herself. I glanced over at her. She was sitting straight-backed in her seat, not looking at anyone, not even her father. Her eyes were fixed on the stage, but they were empty, cold even. I could see the way her fingers gripped the edge of her seat, her knuckles pale, but she didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't show any of the nervousness that I felt pulsing through my veins. I wanted to go over to her, pull her close, tell her it would be okay, that tonight was about her and no one else. But I couldn't. I couldn't do it for her. Not when she was so determined to face everything on her own. She was stronger than I'd ever been at her age. Stronger than I had ever been, period. I could hear the principal's voice rise again, louder now, more urgent. "And now we come to our final award of the night. The student who has achieved the highest honors in the senior class, the one who has excelled not only academically but in leadership, resilience, and service to her community." His eyes swept across the room, settling on Kaia, and I caught my breath. This was it. The moment that should have felt like a victory. The moment I had wanted so badly for her, for us. But as he announced the name, the words didn't land the way I had imagined. "Kaia Ward," he called out. The gym fell silent. Not in awe but in shock. The kind of silence that only happens when something unexpected rattles everyone's nerves. Kaia didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't even blink. She just stood up, as graceful as a dancer, her steps slow but sure. She didn't glance at me, didn't look at Brent. She didn't look at anyone. Her eyes stayed locked straight ahead, her posture rigid, every movement deliberate, like she was preparing for something far beyond what the night had prepared her for. And for a moment I felt it, the tension that rippled through the room, sharp enough to cut. Everyone was waiting for her reaction. Would she cry? Would she smile? Would she speak? But she didn't do any of those things. She walked to the stage, her heels clicking softly against the gym floor, each step measured, controlled. She was a force of nature, walking through a world that had never quite understood her. The applause came in small waves, hesitant at first, unsure if they were supposed to cheer, if this was even her moment. And yet none of it mattered. Kaia was already somewhere else, already distant. I knew it, felt it in the way she carried herself. She took the envelope, the heavy symbol of everything she'd earned, and stood at the microphone. And in that moment something in the air shifted. The room was still buzzing when Kaia reached the podium, the rustle of programs and the shuffle of feet a stark contrast to the icy silence that hung over her. It was as if the entire gymnasium was holding its breath, waiting for her to say something, for her to react. But Kaia, in that moment, was beyond the reach of anyone else's expectations. She was somewhere deeper, a place where no one could follow. Not even me. I leaned forward in my seat, my heart hammering against my chest. I had thought that seeing her up there, holding her moment in the palm of her hand, would have made me proud. And it did in some ways. But what came next? Had no idea. She opened the envelope slowly, her fingers trembling just enough for me to catch it. I knew the weight of that tremor, the one that came not from fear, but from the kind of emotion too heavy to contain. It was a quiet storm, gathering strength behind her eyes, in the way her jaw tightened just slightly. Kaia pulled out the paper, but she didn't immediately look at it. Her gaze swept across the crowd, across Brent and Madison, across me. There was a flash of something in her eyes. Recognition. A subtle, fleeting acknowledgement of what was at stake in this moment. I thought for a second she was going to break, to finally crumble under the weight of everything that had been building for years, but she didn't. Instead, she steadied herself. Her lips parted, and the words that came out next were not what anyone had expected. "I know what you all think of me," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the silence, as if she'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "People have told me my whole life that I'd always be second best. That I wouldn't ever measure up, that I wasn't enough. Not smart enough. Not pretty enough. Not important enough." I could hear the gasps from around the gym. Parents exchanging looks. Students whispering to one another. But Kaia didn't waver. She stood tall, her posture still perfect, her gaze never leaving the microphone. She wasn't angry, not exactly. Her voice was steady, almost detached, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her body was taut, like a bowstring drawn too tight. "I've spent so many years trying to prove that I am enough," she continued, her words deliberate, each one cutting through the air like a blade. "But tonight, I'm not here to prove anything to anyone." She paused, glancing briefly at Brent, and my heart skipped a beat. He didn't meet her gaze. He sat rigid, his fingers gripping the edge of his chair, his jaw clenched tight. "I'm here because I earned this. I'm here because I'm enough for me." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and unapologetic. The gym was so quiet now. You could hear the hum of the lights above us, the faint rustle of a jacket in the back. It was as if no one knew how to respond. But I did. Kaia had always been the quiet one. The one who held her emotions close, hidden behind a mask of stoic composure. She never let anyone see her pain, her frustration, not even me. I had always thought it was because she didn't want to burden me, or maybe she simply didn't trust anyone enough to let them in. But tonight something had shifted. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't pretending to be someone else for anyone's comfort. And for the first time in a long time, I realized how deeply she had been carrying this weight. This burden of trying to be perfect, trying to fit into a world that wasn't built for her. Kaia looked down at the envelope in her hands, the one she hadn't even opened yet. "I'm not my father's daughter," she added softly, and I saw Brent's head snap up at that. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge, a declaration of independence. "I'm not here to live up to anyone's standards. I'm here to write my own story." I thought I might burst with pride, but at the same time, I felt something stir within me. A pang of regret, of missed opportunities. I had spent years telling myself that Kaia didn't need me to fight her battles, that she would grow up to be strong, independent. But now I understood the truth. She had fought those battles alone. And in doing so, she had become more powerful than I could have ever imagined. Kaia looked directly at Brent, her gaze unwavering. And I'm not second place anymore. The words sliced through the room, silencing the murmurs that had begun to rise. No one knew how to react to this sudden shift, this declaration that had completely upended the narrative everyone had built for her. I could see Brent's face, his expression flickering with something I couldn't quite place. It was shock, yes, but there was something else there too. Fear, regret, maybe even a little awe. But it didn't matter. Because in that moment, Kaia had taken control of her own story. She wasn't just the girl who had been second best in her father's eyes. She wasn't the daughter who had spent her life trying to fill a hole that was never hers to fill. She was her own person. And that was enough. The moment Kaia finished speaking, everything seemed to freeze. The applause, when it came, was slow at first, tentative, as if the crowd wasn't sure if they should be cheering or sitting in stunned silence. But then it grew. A ripple of recognition spread from the back of the gym, slowly working its way forward, until the sound of clapping was almost deafening. I stood not thinking about it, just reacting. My legs were unsteady, my heart still pounding from the weight of Kaia's words. I wanted to pull her into a hug right there in front of everyone and tell her how proud I was. How much I had always known she was capable of so much more than anyone ever gave her credit for. But then she did something that surprised me even more. Kaia didn't soak in the applause. She didn't let the crowd's admiration get to her. She simply turned and walked off the stage with quiet dignity, her shoulders squared, her face composed. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She wasn't here for them. She wasn't here for anyone but herself. As she made her way down the aisle toward me, I could feel every pair of eyes on her, on us. There was a weight to that attention, an uncomfortable kind of weight. I wasn't sure if I was proud or terrified, but all I could do was wait for her to reach me, for her to get close enough so that I could tell her how much I loved her. When she did, it was as if everything else around us disappeared. The noise, the clapping, even Brent's stiff figure sitting just a few rows away, still trying to process what had just happened. None of it mattered. Kaia's steps were deliberate, her eyes focused on the path ahead, but when she reached me, there was something in her that broke. She wrapped her arms around me so tightly, like she was holding on for dear life. I could feel her body shaking, but she didn't speak. She just held on, her face buried in the crook of my neck, as if this was the only safe place in the world. I held her back, my hands gentle on her shoulders, trying to offer her the comfort I had never been able to give her before. I didn't know what she needed. Maybe it was just this, maybe it was the simple act of being there. But I held her until the shaking slowed, until I felt her breathing steady. "Did I go too far?" she whispered against my skin, her voice fragile, as if she was second-guessing herself, even after everything she'd just said. "No," I replied, my throat tight, the words slipping out before I even had a chance to think about them. "You didn't go far enough." Her head lifted then, her eyes wide as if she had expected a different answer. "But everyone's looking at me. Like they didn't expect this from me." "They didn't," I said softly. "But you showed them who you are. And that's all that matters." For a moment, I thought I saw something flash across her face, a flicker of doubt. But it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Kaia was stronger than that. She had always been. I had just been blind to it. I glanced over at Brent, sitting on the edge of his seat, eyes locked onto Kaia. His face was pale, the usual smugness replaced with something else, something I couldn't quite name. And next to him, Madison had her lips pursed tightly, her eyes glued to Kaia with a mixture of disbelief and something else I couldn't place. It was as if she was witnessing a version of Kaia she had never considered before. Kaia didn't even look at them. She turned to me, her hand slipping into mine. "Let's go home," she said simply. I nodded, and together we walked back to our seats, the noise around us now a distant hum. I could feel the eyes of everyone on us, whispers swirling, judgments already forming. But Kaia didn't care. And for the first time in years, neither did I. The drive home was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that felt awkward or filled with tension, but the kind where everything had shifted. The storm had passed, and now the air felt clearer somehow. Kaia sat in the passenger seat, still holding the envelope with her scholarship offer from Stanford, the official letter folded neatly inside. I could tell she wasn't ready to open it yet. Leo was in the back, his earbuds in, humming absent-mindedly to some song only he could hear. But I could feel his excitement, the way his fingers were tapping along to the beat. It was impossible not to, especially after everything that had just unfolded. Grandma Ruth had driven separately, but when she pulled up next to us in the parking lot, she rolled down her window and stuck her head out. "Your mama raised a giant, Ka," she called, and Kaia's face lit up with a smile so real, so unguarded, that it made my heart swell. "Thanks, Grandma," Kaia replied, her voice warm, her laugh spilling out easily. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in so long, not the polite chuckles she gave at family dinners or school functions, but the kind of laugh that came from pure joy. It made my chest ache with a feeling I couldn't name. When we got home, Kaia followed me into the kitchen, still wearing her dress, her shoes forgotten somewhere along the way. She leaned against the counter, staring at the envelope like it held the answer to everything. I could feel her quiet contemplation, but I didn't push. Sometimes she needed space to process things on her own. After a moment she spoke, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "I heard him. You know, Dad." I stopped what I was doing, glancing at her. She didn't look angry, not the way I expected. Instead, her face was tired of carrying the weight of his words, tired of pretending like they didn't affect her. But there was no anger in her eyes, just a deep, heavy weariness. "I heard everything," she said, her eyes meeting mine now. "When he said I was like you. Always second place." She paused, and for a moment, I could see the vulnerability in her expression. It hurt. Not because I believed it, but because he did. "He really thinks I'm less because I'm like you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd spent so many years believing I wasn't enough for Kaia, thinking that I was too broken to be the mother she deserved. But now, hearing her say this, something in me shifted. "I used to think that too," I said quietly, my voice raw. "I spent years wondering if maybe he was right. That I wasn't strong enough or ambitious enough. That if I had been more, maybe he wouldn't have left. Maybe he would have respected me." Her face softened, and she reached for my hand. "But he was wrong, Mom. We're not second place. We never were." "I know," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I know now." The night passed in a haze. Kaia had fallen asleep on the couch, Leo curled up beside her, both of them oblivious to the world around them. I stayed in the kitchen long after they had drifted off, the silence of the house a balm to my frayed nerves. The letter from Stanford rested on the coffee table, the glow from the lamp casting a soft light over the crest. I hadn't opened the letter yet. I think part of me was afraid. Afraid that it would be a dream, that it wasn't real. But it was. Everything about this moment felt like the beginning of something bigger than either of us could comprehend. I ran my fingers over the edges of the envelope, wondering how we had ended up here. Wondering how I had ended up here. For so long, I had been convinced that Kaia's path was mine to shape, that I had to protect her from everything that had hurt me. But tonight, watching her stand up and take her place in front of everyone, I realized something. She didn't need my protection anymore. She had grown into someone stronger than I ever thought possible. Someone I had to learn from. The thought gnawed at me as I sat down in the chair beside the coffee table. I hadn't been this unsure of myself in years, but that feeling, of watching my daughter claim her power, of her stepping into the woman I always hoped she'd become, was overwhelming. It wasn't just pride. It was awe. I heard a rustling sound from the living room, and when I looked up, Kaia was standing in the doorway. She was barefoot, her dress now wrinkled from the long night, her hair loose around her shoulders. But she still had that quiet strength in her posture, the same strength she had shown in front of the entire school. It was there, unwavering, even in the quiet of the night. "Mom," she said softly, her voice gentle but with an edge of uncertainty I hadn't expected. I stood up, meeting her gaze. "Hey, sweetheart. You okay?" She nodded, but there was something in her eyes. Something I hadn't seen before. A rawness that made my chest tighten. "Can we talk?" I swallowed. "Of course." She stepped into the room, her bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floor, and took the seat next to me. For a moment neither of us spoke. It wasn't the kind of silence that was comfortable. It was the kind that felt like an unspoken question hung between us, waiting to be answered. Kaia's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the letter on the coffee table, turning it over and over in her fingers. "I keep thinking about what he said," she finally whispered. "About being second place. About not being good enough." I hadn't realized just how much those words still haunted her. Not until now. I wanted to tell her that it didn't matter what he said, that she was more than enough. But the truth was, those words had haunted me too. They had settled in my bones like an unwelcome guest, like something I couldn't shake. And I could see now that they had done the same to her. "He's wrong," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "You've never been second place, Kaia. Not to me. Not to anyone." Her lips twitched, but it wasn't a smile. It was something deeper. "But what if he's right? What if I'll never be enough for him?" The question hit me hard. I wasn't sure if she meant it for herself or for me. Either way, I didn't know how to answer. What could I say? That a father's love was unconditional. That the things he said didn't matter in the face of her brilliance, her strength. I didn't believe it myself. "You are enough," I said quietly, my voice firm. "You've always been enough. And I'm proud of you. More than you could ever know." She finally met my gaze, her eyes searching mine as if looking for the truth I had never fully spoken. "I know. But I need to stop pretending, Mom." I blinked, taken aback by her words. "What do you mean?" Kaia took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, I saw vulnerability in her eyes. Raw and unfiltered. "I need to stop pretending like his approval matters. Like I need it. I want to stop waiting for him to see me. To see us." I felt my heart ache as I heard the words spill from her lips. I had never realized just how much of her life had been shaped by waiting for a man who would never see her the way she needed to be seen. "I want to be proud of myself," Kaia continued, her voice quiet but steady, "without needing him to approve. Without needing him to validate me." I didn't know how to answer at first. The words felt heavy in my mouth, too heavy to say out loud. But I finally spoke, my voice trembling. "I wish I had taught you that sooner. I wish I hadn't let his shadows fall over us for so long." She squeezed my hand, her grip gentle but sure. "You taught me, Mom. You taught me everything I needed to know. You showed me how to keep going, even when the world was telling me I wasn't enough. You showed me how to be strong." I didn't know what to say to that. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that Kaia had grown into someone I couldn't have imagined, someone I could never have prepared for. She was more than what I had ever been. She was more than what any of them could have ever expected. "I love you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm so proud of you." Kaia smiled then, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes, the same way it used to when she was little and everything was simpler. She took the letter and held it up between us, the Stanford crest catching the light. "This is mine," she said, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. "This is the future I've earned. Not because of him. Not because of anyone else. Just me." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed her. The next morning, the house was quiet again. It was the kind of stillness that had become familiar, but this time it wasn't oppressive. It felt like the calm after a storm, like the air had been cleared, the weight lifted. Kaia had left early for some errands, leaving Leo and me to fend for ourselves. My mind kept drifting back to last night, the way Kaia had spoken so openly, so honestly. It had been a long time since I'd felt that much raw honesty in my own life. I glanced at the letter still resting on the coffee table, the Stanford crest gleaming in the soft morning light. The excitement of her victory hadn't faded, but I was still grappling with everything else that had happened. The conversation we'd had last night had been important, more so than I realized in the moment. Kaia was no longer just my daughter. She was an individual, standing on her own 2 feet, carving her path. And as much as I wanted to protect her from the world, I knew now that I couldn't. The question was, did I even know how to be her mother anymore? Or had I been so consumed with surviving, with making sure she survived, that I forgot how to truly support her? I was still lost in thought when I heard the sound of Kaia's car pulling into the driveway. Her return seemed to signal the shift in the air again, a kind of tension that neither of us could avoid. The space between us felt different, and I wasn't sure if it was because of the rawness of last night or because the silence between us had grown even more palpable. I stood up and went to the kitchen to prepare some coffee, trying to act like everything was normal. But my hands were shaky, betraying the calm exterior I was trying to project. The sound of her footsteps echoed down the hallway, and I could feel her presence before I saw her. "Mom!" Kaia's voice was quiet as she entered the room. She didn't look at me immediately, instead heading straight for the counter, her fingers lightly brushing over the surface as if she were trying to steady herself. I didn't answer right away, giving her space. She was still processing everything, still figuring out where we stood after last night. "Can we talk?" she asked, turning to face me. Her eyes were no longer as sharp, but the weight of her words still hung in the air. I nodded. "Of course." She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging a little as if she were letting go of some of the tension that had built up. "I know last night was a lot," she began, looking down at her hands, twisting them in front of her. I needed to say that stuff. To him. And to everyone. I didn't interrupt. I just watched her, my heart aching as I realized how much she had carried alone, how much she had hidden behind a smile, behind the perfect image she had created for herself. "I'm proud of you, Kaia," I said softly, meaning every word, even if it sounded too simple for everything she had just achieved. "You were amazing last night. What you said, how you stood there." I paused, swallowing past the lump in my throat. "You made your voice heard. And I am so proud of you." She shook her head slightly, a smile flickering at the corners of her mouth. "It wasn't about him. Or anyone else, really. It was about me, Mom. About me finally believing that I'm enough. I've been so scared of feeling like I'm never going to measure up, like I'm always chasing someone else's expectations. And last night, for the first time, I didn't care if they understood. I just wanted to be me." Her words hit me harder than I anticipated. She was finally letting go of all the weight she'd been carrying. She was starting to shed the layers of doubt, fear, and expectation that had shaped her for so long. And I could see the woman she was becoming, the woman I had always hoped she would be. "I can't even begin to imagine what that must have felt like for you," I said, my voice shaky with emotion. "But I'm so grateful you found that strength in yourself." Kaia's eyes softened, and she crossed the room to stand beside me. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, her presence quiet and comforting. Then, as if deciding to let go of some of the weight she was carrying, she spoke again. "I think it's time for me to stop hiding. I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not, just to fit into some idea of who I should be. I've spent so much of my life trying to earn love and approval, but now, I just want to be." Her words settled into the air between us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were truly seeing each other. No barriers, no pretending. Just 2 women who had lived through their own struggles, trying to understand each other. I placed my hand on hers, squeezing it gently. "I think you've always been enough, Kaia. Even when you didn't see it yourself, I always saw you for who you really were." She gave me a soft smile, her eyes glistening with a hint of tears. "Thanks, Mom. For everything." I pulled her into a hug, and this time it wasn't just about me comforting her. It was about us both healing together. There were still things unspoken between us, things that we would continue to work through. But in that moment, I realized we were closer than ever. We were both learning to be strong, not just for each other but for ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next few days passed in a peaceful blur. The tension that had once hung between Kaia and me seemed to dissipate, replaced by a new kind of understanding. It wasn't always perfect, and there were still moments where silence stretched between us. But it was a different kind of silence, one that no longer felt heavy, but full of promise and unspoken support. It was a Saturday morning when Kaia came to me with a letter she had kept close since the night of her graduation. She had finally opened it on her own, just as we had both known she would. It was a letter confirming her full-ride scholarship to Stanford, but it was more than just an acceptance letter. It was her future unfolding before her eyes, a future she had earned, not by following anyone else's expectations, but by choosing to believe in herself. "Mom," she said, holding the letter in her hands, her eyes wide with something I couldn't quite read. "I still can't believe this is real." I looked at her, my heart swelling with pride. "You earned it, Kaia. Every bit of it." She smiled, a smile so full of warmth and confidence that it took my breath away. For the first time, I saw a young woman standing before me, not the daughter who had been struggling to find her place, but someone who knew who she was, who understood her own power and value. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened, Kaia would be okay. "I'm going to do this," she continued, her voice steady. "I'm going to make my own way. And I know I have to do this for me, but also for you." I reached out, pulling her into a tight hug. "You've already done more for me than I could ever ask for, Kaia." She pulled back slightly, looking up at me with that same smile. "We're in this together, Mom. Always." And that was the truth. No matter where life took us, no matter the distances or challenges, we would always be together, linked by something stronger than just blood. It was the bond of shared history, of understanding each other's silent battles, and of knowing that, in the end, we had each other's backs. Later that day, Grandma Ruth stopped by for a visit. She had been as thrilled as we were when she heard about Kaia's scholarship. After the initial celebration, Grandma Ruth had a few words to share. "I don't know how you did it, Evelyn," she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "But I see it now. All that you've done for Kaia, it's paying off. She's grown into something amazing." I smiled at her words, but there was a touch of bittersweetness to them. "It wasn't just me," I replied softly. "It was Kaia. She's the one who fought through all of it, who found her strength, even when she didn't know it was there." Grandma Ruth nodded. "You taught her how to stand tall. Don't sell yourself short." We sat in quiet understanding for a while, and then Ruth patted my hand. "You've both come a long way." The days leading up to Kaia's departure for Stanford felt like a whirlwind. The house was full of packing boxes, last-minute preparations, and a quiet sense of anticipation. I found myself watching her more closely, noticing how much she had changed, how much she had grown. She was no longer the fragile girl who needed constant reassurance. She was becoming the woman she had always been capable of being, even when she hadn't believed in herself. On the morning of her departure, we stood in the driveway together, the car packed and ready to go. Leo was bouncing around, trying to keep the mood light, but I could see the heaviness in his eyes too. He was going to miss his big sister more than he let on. Kaia turned to me, her face serious but soft. "Mom, I don't know if I've said it enough, but thank you for everything." I nodded, my chest tightening with emotion. "You don't need to thank me, Kaia. I just wanted to make sure you knew that you were always enough. You've always been more than enough." She smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll make you proud, I promise." "I know you will," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm already proud of you." As she got into the car, I stepped back, watching her go. I felt a mixture of sadness and pride, a bittersweet feeling that only mothers understand when they let go of their children for the first time. And then, as the car pulled away, I realized something. Kaia had taken the pen. She had written her own story, not just for herself, but for both of us. And the story was far from over. We had both found our strength, not by fighting, but by understanding that sometimes the quietest voices are the strongest. Sometimes the loudest thing in the room is a woman standing tall in her truth. And I knew that no matter where life took us from here, I would always be her mother, and she would always be my daughter. Together we would face whatever came next.